and we should be live. So welcome everybody to the first film career community Facebook panel. And I'm John Clay Burnett. Been doing film for over 10 years, have my own business. I'm going to be moderating and letting most of the rest of these guys do the talking. My longtime colleague and partner, Andrew Bartlett, we do Motion University and the Academy together. He'll be helping facilitate live questions, so feel free to drop any questions, any updates, clarifications, and we'll get those taken care of and fit in. So let's just start and do a quick round of introductions for everybody that's currently here. And let's start here with Serena.
Hi, I'm Serena Collins, and I actually got started when a local church in my town had a film school, and I took that over the course of a summer. So I went on to study cinema at a university where is like pretty close to where I live, and it was fine. And then I got more experience actually after college when I found Motion University. I took the beta Motion University, and then when they went and did the full course, I took that. Had a great time, great experience, and I'm also a commercial producer and freelance videographer. So
cool, good, thank you. Let's go over to Luke.
All right, my name is Luke DeBoer. I am a filmmaker. I primarily work on feature film sets as a second AD, and I also do freelance web design. I also have my own startup called Set Hero, which is web project management software for filmmakers. So I run that and kind of hop around to different film sets from time to time. So I am familiar with the independent kind of creative contractor space, and yeah, I look forward to sharing any input I can give.
Cool, thank you. And Brett.
Hi, I'm Brett Varvel. I'm a feature film director and actor. I run a nonprofit film organization called House of Grace Films, where I'm actually in the midst of relaunching the organization itself. We're not only going to be producing movies, but we're also going to be partnering with ministries and other film companies to help them tell their story through film. And I also do a lot of freelance videography, editing, and jack of all trades type thing, and get my hands on a lot of different corporate films, music videos, and everything in between.
Cool. Yep. Thank you. And Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Schutz. I've been primarily working for the last several years as a freelance filmmaker doing promotional work for ministries, churches, organizations like that. So a little bit of everything on those projects. I'm at the stage in this whole kind of group of moving from doing work primarily for ministries on a more free basis to the whole career aspect of it. I'm really looking forward personally to hearing a lot of this that's going to be said on the panel. In the feature space and in the narrative space, I've worked primarily as a visual effects artist and have worked on several films so far in that realm. So
good, cool. And then we have joining by phone at the moment, Adam Gregory. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Adam, and a little bit about what you do.
Perfect. Hey, sorry I'm running late. Is that a lunch meeting? So my name's Adam Gregory. I'm a freelance cinematographer and producer out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Yeah, I do a lot of, probably like half of my work is DPing for other production companies in town, be it a commercial or internal project or promo, and then the other half would be producing my own projects for companies, and then producing some short films, and then working toward producing and DPing feature films. So that's where I'm at. Then in the industry, like 7.5 years now, and a year and a half of that's been freelance, running my own company. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, we're glad to have everybody on board as the panel. Just to get to meet new folks, let people introduce themselves that people in the group don't know. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And just trying to provide, we all come from different backgrounds and experiences and different specialties and expertise. So there were a few questions that have been submitted from a variety of sources that we kind of wanted to put up for discussion. And feel free to answer as any of you guys feel able, or just this is just communication, collaboration, conversation. So the first topic here to talk about would be finances. So part of this group, the filmmakers career is not just about people who want to do film, but we say it's about the business and the business side of things. So finance is really important when it comes to building a long-standing career. How do you keep track of business income and expenses? Do you have P&L? What kind of things are you doing to keep track of business income and expenses?
Well, I'll just jump in here and say one of the important things to understand when you're starting off, and I know to those who've been doing this for a while, this sounds pretty basic, but establishing the distinction between your personal finances and your business finances. And what that should look like is ideally setting up a separate bank account for your business expenses. And then any kind of, gear you have to buy or things you need to purchase, like music licensing or things for your company, should come out of that business account. And then any income you get from your work, like clients paying you primarily, should be deposited into that bank account. So that helps right there, is establishing that distinction. And then for me, what I do is I just use an accounting software, and then every month or two I go through and log my bank transactions and make sure I have an accurate record of what I spent money on and where I got money from, what clients and that kind of thing. So it's mostly just keeping track of it. And you could even do it in a spreadsheet to start off and keep track of it that way. And then as you grow, you might find a need for another kind of software to let you run a few more reports and that kind of thing. But that's personally how I do it. And just the concept of separating yourself from your business and running them as two separate entities.
Good. Other thoughts?
I echo what Luke just said. I have kind of a couple different bank accounts, I guess. One of them is through House of Grace Films, my organization. I have a board of directors that helps me oversee all of the business aspects of the ministry. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have a CPA on my board of directors who helps me keep track of all of that. My wife is my home accountant, and so she helps me. There's a program that we use called YNAB. It's called You Need a Budget. That has been very, very helpful for us in separating not just personal expenses, but then even freelance business expenses that I have at home, gear purchases, music licensing, all those different types of things that Luke just said. So come tax season, it's very helpful to have all of that organized and separated so you don't get audited.
Yay. Just to mention, I use YNAB as well, and YB for You Need a Budget. Another tool I've heard of is Every Dollar, which is produced by Ramsey. That's a free tool. And I'll also say I've heard of a lot of freelancers using Wave apps, WAVE. I recently started using that and really love it because you can send invoices and people can pay online for those, and it's great for freelance business. So just find the tool that's right for you, but use something.
How many of you are using like actual P&L and keeping track on that level of finances? Anybody? No.
I'll just say for me, we're at this. My brother Timothy and I, Evergreen Media Productions is our production company, and with that, it's just basically a spreadsheet of what comes in, what goes out. So it's not been on that scale.
Sure.
So far.
Mm-hmm.
I know when we were trying to buy a house, we were freelance, and they wanted a P&L sheet, and we'd never done that before, and so we were like scrambling, how do we get P&L for getting a mortgage for a house and those kind of things. So I know those can be important at times. So cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on business income, expenses?
Another thought is, well, I don't produce like a P&L statement. Obviously, it's important to know how much you made, and not just because you need to know that, but because you need to pay taxes on that. And you need to know what is like a deductible business expense and what is not. And so keeping track of all that stuff is really important come tax season, because you need to have a record of all of that. I was just talking with a friend of mine who is a freelance creative, and he's been doing this for 5 years, and actually hadn't been keeping track of his income at all. And so this week he spent like several days just trying to get, like, going through his bank accounts, trying to figure out, what was this $800 deposit from? Who paid that to me? And I just saw him going through that headache. And so don't get there. Don't let yourself get there. For me, my little milestone checkup is every quarter when I have to pay quarterly tax estimates. That's when I need to have all my books balanced. I need to know exactly how much I made that quarter. And so that helps me kind of keep things in order, so I don't get to the end of the year and have this week-long headache fest trying to figure out how much I made and that kind of thing. So for sure, if you have not done taxes before, I know there's a lot of online tools for doing that. I personally go to an accountant, and she charges, like a CPA tax lady, and she charges like $150 or something. But I have found, for me, it's more than worth it to have her asking me the questions and handling all the paperwork for my business and for the several other businesses that I am a part of. So anyways, taxes is all I bring up, of making sure you have a plan for that.
Right. No, that's good. Andrew, do we have any other further questions that anybody's asking on finance stuff?
Yeah, so Zach had a question. Said, what percentage of what you make do you typically get to keep after taxes? I've heard the number is 65%, but I'm curious what you all have to say.
I think it's different for different states in the country, but typically my wife and I always reserve about 25% of my income for taxes to pay out. But then that varies depending on how much income I made in that given year. And then also there are projects that I do throughout the year where taxes are already taken out in the midst of that project. And so there's a lot of balancing that you have to do, and just fact checking. But like what Luke said, quarterly, just making sure that you get ahead of those tax payments, because then when it comes tax season, you don't owe anything. And sometimes you actually get money back from the IRS, which is always great to receive money from the IRS instead of paying them. Yeah.
This year I got over $1,000 back, which I was really happy about. And I just leave it as a credit on the account kind of thing. But at least for me, again, I'm not sure if it's the same for everyone, but my understanding is it's 10% on the first $10,000 you make. And then after that, it's an additional 15%. So it more or less comes out in the wash to be about 25% of my income I pay in taxes. Now, that doesn't include deductions. A friend of mine who does professional sound bought almost half of his income he spent buying gear. And so he can deduct all of that. So what he actually paid in tax this year is like less than $1,000 for an income of, over 20K. So it all depends on how your deductions pan out. But
And one additional question on that, I think for those just getting started, I know it was confusing. Like, at what point do I need to start paying attention to taxes and, like, you know, all that kind of thing. So like for someone who's sort of starting out still, and maybe they've just got paid a couple $100s on a project, and like they're starting to want to move into doing more projects like that, you know, where there's, you know, increasing budget. At what point should they be paying attention to keeping track of their finances and the whole taxes aspect?
Well, somebody who's kind of at that threshold right in there, I would say go ahead and start as early as possible. Yes, it hurts for me, I'm right now, I'm paying the self-employment tax. That's at the level of the income at this point. But keeping track of it, knowing that I need to have everything laid out. So as the jobs become available to have the additional income, it's not going to hurt me one bit, or anybody else here one bit, to have everything laid out in place so that whenever you do grow, you know, hopefully you've already got everything laid out. You've got the groundwork. So I'd say as early as possible. If you've moved to a separate business account for your work, definitely at that point, without a doubt, go ahead and start keeping track of it. And
one other thought that just from my experience when I was starting and began to get into that spot of like, okay, I should probably start paying taxes now. I actually went with my parents to their tax preparer and just kind of sat in the room. And then she asked me some questions at the end. And then I started going in subsequent years. But if your parents have a tax preparer, or, I mean, chances are they've figured out how to pay taxes by this point in their lives, we hope anyway. So if you can piggyback off of their knowledge, and even if they're not in the creative industry, just going along with them and understanding how taxes work as a concept is a really great place to start, and then kind of ease into it. But I'm sure there's some age or income level where it's like, okay, now you have to pay taxes, but I don't know the answer to that myself.
Good. Okay. Let's go on to the next question here on how do you pursue a career in filmmaking while still working another job full time? And this isn't, I mean, I've heard this question multiple times from multiple different people more recently. When working a full-time job, how do you get into filmmaking? How do you make time for that? Any thoughts?
I could jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like it's kind of in the meantime. It's like, it is kind of helpful if you do have a full-time job where you are a little bit close to the kind of field that you want to be in, because like, say as a commercial producer, it is kind of like in that genre of like filmmaking, that creative aspect, where I feel like if I, you know, want to learn different like software programs, or say like do something like Motion University, not only is it like kind of feeding into what I do on a day-to-day basis, but then it's like I can kind of think differently about what I'm doing and how I can use those skills even when I want to like further learning. So I think it does help if you can kind of have something where you're kind of close to what you want to be doing, even if that's in that creative vein, or kind of my thoughts on that.
Good.
I also think that you have to, for yourself, you have to determine what is filmmaking to you, because I mean, it's such a broad term. Whether that's doing narratives, or whether that's doing documentaries, or whether it's doing corporate films, promotional movies, it's all filmmaking. And so I think it's kind of an individual goal or assessment of what is your main desire. For me, you know, I've been pursuing I want to do exclusively features and narratives. That's all I want to do. But I also know that there are gaps in between those projects where I have to be able to provide a living for my family. And so I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Who was just talking?
Serena.
arena, like what she was just saying, being close to the space that you want to be eventually be working in is very, very important, because one, it pays the bills. Two, you're honing your craft, and you're sharpening your muscles, so to speak, and you're staying sharp, so that you don't, because it's very difficult to jump on like for me, to jump on a film set, have a bunch of years go by when not practicing the craft at all, and then jump back up on another film set and expect myself to be excellent. And so I think that, and actually I believe that diversifying yourself in a lot of different forms of storytelling makes you a much stronger filmmaker across the board, instead of just focusing on one area only and hoping that just is going to pay your bills.
Good.
One thing I would chime in as well is, with the thought of having a full-time job separate from filmmaking and feeling like that's a separate thing, God gives us priorities. He's given us responsibilities. If you've got a family, you need to be able to take care of that family, and that may be what you need to be doing at that time. So for me, at this stage in my life, I've had to help with my mom. She's had some significant health issues where she needs somebody here at home with her 24/7. So what I've been able to do in that time is look for opportunities with the ministry stuff, with things like that, where I can choose projects that will still allow me to work, to grow, to stretch my filmmaking craft at the same time as filling those things. And don't feel like just because you're not doing something in that field at this particular moment in your life, that is what you want to be doing the whole time. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You may be doing what God is calling you to do at this time in your life. So make sure that those priorities are straight, and make sure that you're at the right place in all these other areas as well. And then the additional you'll be able to grow into it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Good. What about for people? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. And also, say like you are in a place where you're not quite in that area where you really want to be. And it's like, well, as filmmakers, think of all the different aspects of film. Like, say, if you're not like shooting film, you can learn story. Like, there's just so much to filmmaking that I don't think you really could be a place where you couldn't be learning some aspect of it. Like, there's a lot to it. Stories happening all around us all the time. So
that's a really good point. That is a really good point, that even if you're not doing the craft itself, there's life experience, and learning how people interact with each other is an important part of making films as well. So what are some other thoughts or ideas for people that, I don't know, just say are like in real estate or anything that aren't in a creative storytelling medium type job of any sort, but want to start bridging that gap? How do you start making short projects, small projects? I mean, we're going to just say they're working an 8 to 5, 9 to 5. I mean, how do you make time for that? Do you start taking weekends? What are some easy ways to get started when you're working a full-time job and you've got to be dedicated to those things?
Well, I don't think you can do it alone. That would be my first piece of advice. You surround yourself with other creative people who have a similar passion or drive as you do. And the bottom line is, if you are at a job where that's not even related to the field, and you're there for 8 hours a day, you're going to have to do some nights. You're going to have to do some weekends. You're going to have to take vacation time to hone the craft and to get on different projects. And honestly, I've always kind of stuck to the belief that if it's a passion and it burns inside of you enough, you will actually enjoy spending that time. And if you don't enjoy spending that time, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Filmmaking is tough. It is hard. It's grueling on a lot of different levels, but if you don't enjoy that grind, and if you don't enjoy the long hours and the hurry up and wait aspect of it, then then maybe it's not for you, but you will find that out pulling those late nights and those long weekends. I think that it, like for me, one very key aspect was early on in my marriage, having a very blunt and honest conversation with my wife, explaining to her, this is kind of the life of, there's going to be seasons of time where I'm gone and, you know, we don't hang out much or whatever. Now granted, there's a responsibility on my part to make sure that my priorities are straight because my wife is my first priority on this planet after my relationship with the Lord, and then my kids. So if I'm neglecting them just for the sake of saying I'm pursuing a dream, well, I believe I'm not honoring the Lord in that. But there is a balancing act of what is expected of people who want to pursue this full time. So I think, you know, but like Jonathan was saying, you got to be patient. There are seasons of life where you're going to be doing some pretty horrible stuff, boring stuff just to get by. But I believe that there's moments there where God wants to use us to speak into other people's lives, even though we may not be doing what we want to be doing. And we shouldn't neglect that because there's great blessing in that, I think.
When you say you'll be doing some pretty horrible stuff, what do you mean by that? Was boring your clarification? What do you mean? Horrible stuff, meaning just agonizingly boring or things that don't interest you or anything like that. Not that you would be dealing drugs or anything like that. Hopefully.
Little come on the side.
Yeah, but more just that you will not be enjoying what you're doing. I mean, even in the creative space, for projects that I've taken on, that I'm doing one on the side right now, it's like clawing my eyes out boring, but it helps pay the bills and it keeps me fresh with learning technology. So
yeah. No, I was just going to say, totally agree with that. Like, as a commercial producer, sometimes you just get those projects where you really want to take a creative spin to it, but the client is really set. Like, they just want it to be like, call now, like call today, like right away. And you're like, no, please, I want to do something else with this. But I think it's like not everything that when you are like working full time and you just are wanting to do more of the creative stuff, like not every project that you work on is going to like fulfill that creative dream that you have. But I agree, there's like, even if it is a boring project that you are having to fulfill, like you're still getting to whatever you're, like if you're writing, like you're still practicing that skill of writing. You're still, if you're having to shoot video, you're still practicing. It's not like you're separate and waiting for one day. Like, it does count. Like I believe that it does count.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
One thought also, in addition, is look for places where you can give in this area. If your church has a media ministry, I can tell you from experience, that is always a place where, well, I've yet to find a place where that was not significantly lacking. That's a place where you can contribute and stretch those abilities. You may be doing sermon intro videos. You may be doing video announcements. It's getting you an opportunity to do something, work with somebody else, assist somebody else, and still be doing something that's stretching your craft and stretching your abilities.
I would say too, going back to the kind of the last thing that was said about, you know, if you're working a 9-to-5 job, how could you break into the industry? The church thing that was just brought up is a good way. Start volunteering at your church and just try to make some videos for them in a really low pressure situation. Might be a really great way to just practice and get yourself out there. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, so I have a question. Unless, yeah, go ahead. If you had something you want to add on that.
Sorry, I was actually just going to say another great way is just to take time to connect with filmmakers. I think Motion University or the Academy, certainly CWVFF, the Christian Worldview Film Festival, and there's tons of other places where you can go, you can take, 2 to 7 days, over a weekend even. You might not even have to take vacation time from your day job, but just to start dipping your toe in the water, meeting people, seeing films, and maybe set a goal for yourself of creating a short film that's like 2 minutes long over the course of the next year, and try and submit it to a festival, and just take those baby steps. I think of the scene in Pirates of the Caribbean where Jack Sparrow is standing on the mast of his sinking ship as it comes into port. And like you see it sinking lower and lower and lower and lower. And the timing works out just right. So the mast gets to the dock and he steps right off the sinking mast onto the dock and keeps walking. And it's kind of like that position of trying to transition from one thing to another. And the timing is really hard. And you will feel discouraged, like I'll never get out of my day job. But I would just encourage people to take the long view, take the 10-year view of how can I transition to something I want to be doing in 10 years or 5 years, and then sort of map it out, like find a path to ease you there. And yeah, I guess I would just encourage people to not feel trapped, but to kind of be empowered to make a plan for a longer term transition.
Good.
Yeah, that's excellent. So one
Andrew, you
thing,
had a question or a comment?
yeah. So here's something I thought we'll just do real quick if everybody can answer this. So what's one thing you're doing right now? Like, I feel like if we can like bring it down to concrete, either one thing you're doing right now that helps pay the bills that maybe people don't see. Like, we all have our social media lives where it looks like all we do is these amazing projects and stuff all the time. What's something you're doing right now to that maybe it's not what you would post on your reel or, something like that, or it can be. I mean, I'm just saying, like, bring it practical here. What are you doing to actually make money? And we'll just keep it short so we can keep moving. But yeah, what's one thing you're doing right now to actually bring in money? Should I maybe call it out so we can like just have you ready?
I'll just start it off. I'm
Sure.
shooting. I'm doing a project right now where I shoot this piano teacher teaching her method of teaching little children how to play the piano. I set up a camera, I push a button, I go home, deliver the footage. It is boring and not creative, but it pays well. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm doing it.
All right.
For me, a project I'm just wrapping up actually is, it's for a painting company. And I'm literally putting together a slideshow of pictures of them painting houses with a narration underneath saying, like, we start with the substrate and making sure that the varnish has a clean finish. Next, we cover your furniture from top to bottom. It's literally about the driest thing you could think of. And so I've been doing that. And I also just did, I did a project for a client where I designed emails for them, like HTML email templates. So those are probably two of my low lights, if we're sharing those.
So literally, Luke, you're making videos about watching paint dry.
It feels just about like watching paint dry. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I've shot a lot of, not a ton of them, but I've shot a good amount of like instructional videos that are just super dry and on a factory floor. Your hands in here, and here's the part that you're supposed to make, and then it's super boring, but it pays the bills. And I don't post about it online. I send photos to my friends sometimes of like, hey, look what I'm doing. And they're like, whoa, that doesn't look fun. Yeah.
I think for me, sometimes it comes down to doing graphic design, which is not like in my portfolio. It's not what I post around a whole lot. They can go use it, but it's not something I necessarily advertise as a service that we provide. But doing graphic design stuff can be a helpful side things from time to time.
Mm.
Anybody else want to throw something in there? Something you're doing that's...
Well, as a commercial producer, it's what I do every day to pay the bills, but some of the low light projects right now, so like literally like I'll do doing web banners for like a hotel that's being liquidated. And that's not very exciting.
Fun.
Sometimes I have like there's a financial expert that will come to the news station where I work, and he is literally against a green screen, and he just stands and talks. And I literally create a slideshow. So I know like what a fiduciary is, and like, I don't know. It's not the most exciting.
Me in this whole world, it's been kind of ironic. It's the stuff that I love to do and the stuff that I hate to do just kind of mesh perfectly. Visual effects is a lot of fun, but I end up rotoscoping. And for me, roto is a four-letter word, it drives me nuts. But the most recent one on a paying project was I was animating maps, which was amazing fun to learn in great detail the troop movements in Europe in World War II surrounding the Battle of Dunkirk. But we had the design of the maps had little hash marks, and so it was keyframing to remove the progressing of the hash marks so it didn't look like a buzzsaw or marching ants. You'd think that it was, oh yes, I got a project I wanted to do, and I did, and I loved doing it, but you can find in any project something that's going to make it a low light or a highlight. It can go both ways. So having the perspective of, okay, this is what I need to be doing at this moment, regardless of how mundane it seems,
Sure,
can really help.
That's excellent. Very good.
So those are all great, even ideas and just feedback on what you guys are doing. It's encouraging to hear the small things even from time to time. I want to use that to feed into one of our other questions here of how do you push yourself creatively even when you're working on a client project? And I'm kind of taking here that a client project assumes that it's probably one of the stand in the corner kind of boring or less than ideal type projects when working with the client. So maybe it's also even along the lines of not a passion project. You've saved money or got your friends and we're going to go do something on the weekend that we all think is cool. When you're doing client work that's less than ideal, how do you push yourself creatively in that type of scenario?
I'll offer a thought on that. I think that it's important for us to constantly stretch ourselves, no matter what you're working on. Find something that you want to work on to improve your skills, and try to, in some ways, force that into the project. As Serena was saying, sometimes the client is pretty cut and dry, and they just say that, please just do this, push these buttons for us. But I always try to find whether I'm trying to get a budget approved for a client. I actually heard this piece of advice recently. If you feel uncomfortable, or if you don't feel uncomfortable when you are submitting the bid, you probably haven't charged enough. And so if you feel uncomfortable submitting that bid, you're probably more along the lines of what you should be getting paid. For example, this piano teacher project I'm working on, I told the client, I said, it'd be nice if we could shoot this on a higher quality. So we're shooting with a cinema camera, which is not necessary, but it gives me an opportunity to shoot with high quality and then try some different lighting techniques that I don't usually try, because I can't lose. I'm shooting a woman talking in front of a piano. It's really kind of simple, but rather than just doing the 3-point lighting system, let's try some stuff and see if it works. And even though I'm not a DP, it actually, in an odd way, helps me from a directing and acting standpoint. When I'm on set working with a professional DP, I can kind of make their job easier by knowing what they do and why they do it. And so I think challenging yourself, even in a mundane project, gives you the opportunity to sharpen a skill that you're not fine-tuning regularly.
Good. Anybody else thoughts on how to push yourself creatively? How do you even work in, I guess, even maybe what some of the balance of being creative versus meeting what the client needs? I know as creative, sometimes we can get all wound up on like, oh, this is going to be the most amazing next way to shoot off a commercial I saw, and maybe that's not what the client needs. So how do you kind of balance those things of being creative and yet delivering what the client's going to actually need for their needs, their audience?
Thinking one thing that I found to be helpful, like when a project is just like, you get a project and say it's not the most exciting, but you're like, how can I be creative and help the client to get an end product that is actually people want to see? Sometimes it helps to like look for, like say it's like an insurance company or something. So it's like it can seem kind of dry, but then it's like look for the people and look for the emotion, and that can be like, well, say they're insuring, like, let's just say boats or something. And it's like, okay, you go to their website and you're like, yeah, what can we say about this to make people like want to get their insurance from these people? So when you get there and you're like, well, the reason that they would insure boats is because they want you to be able to relax when you're having an enjoyable time, say on the water, or you don't have to worry because you're covered, like, or just, I don't know, kind of getting into get past the like technical stuff, and then you can see what's the heart of what they're trying to do. Like, how do they want people to feel? It can kind of, and if you can connect with that place, like I'd want to be able to relax and not have to worry and enjoy nature or whatever with my family. And then it kind of gets the creative process, I feel like, at least rolling for me, where it's like, I can work from that. Like, I think people can connect with that versus call today because we have excellent people to help you with all your needs. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's a really good thought. That's a really good approach to that as well. Anybody else? How do you? I think Serena touched on a good point there. The question is kind of could almost be phrased even, how do you find passion in projects that are just very client structured and based? Anybody else have thoughts on how do you get excited about client work?
Kind of a thought back on the other question for me would be how to get a client to do something creative. I've kind of found like people won't pay you to do something you haven't done before. And so it's like you almost need to do something that you really want to do for somebody that's not putting a lot of money in or risk with you. And then I've found that other clients will be like, I want that. And then it's like, okay, now I'm taking and doing something way more creative for a client that they never would have done that until they saw it. I've had that happen before where they're like, we want something like that, and then I can kind of tailor it to them and change things around. But it wasn't until they actually saw something that made them think like, oh, we could do that for us. But I've also had it on the other end where it's definitely there's just certain things where you're just gonna have to just make what the client wants, and yeah, that's a tough one. It all depends on what client I'm working with. Like some clients just totally trust you, make something sweet, and other clients want everybody on a teleprompter saying the one line that they want, so it's tough.
One thing I think that is helpful is when you start working with a client, it's starting with the question of why and diving into that with them of like, what is the goal of this video and what is the why behind it? So to like piggyback on Serena's idea of the boat insurance and like, okay, so we're trying to sell insurance, right? But like, why will people want to buy that? And what is a story they can connect to around that? And narrative commercial work is becoming more and more of a kind of trend these days. And I think as the creative, as the expert in this situation, it's your responsibility to bring a voice to the project as well. And that doesn't mean you will always get your way. Certainly there are clients that want something kind of cut and dry, but look for opportunities to tell stories, I think is the biggest thing that I would say. If you can find a story about like some Scandinavian sailor that, you know, his boat was in the like siege of Dunkirk or whatever, and now he uses this insurance company to insure his, you know, this boat that his father passed to him or something. And like, that is a story that just by telling that and saying, you know, State Farm protects my father's legacy and that kind of stuff, it like connects with us at a different level than just 1-800 by State Farm. So if there are those opportunities to bring story even into some more mundane client work, I think that will make you enjoy it more, and I think it will help your viewers also enjoy it more. But it certainly can't apply. You can't do that with every situation, but look for the ways to do that.
That's good, and that's it's actually a good lead into one of our other questions we want to talk about is, how does narrative work fit into your career as a filmmaker? I think often narrative is held up as like the top of the hill. Like that's, everybody wants to make feature films or short films, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not always our day-to-day reality. We've kind of covered some of that a little bit, but just how does narrative work in and fit into your career as a filmmaker, whatever avenue that you're working in?
I've found with like B-roll for projects for corporate clients has gotten more, like I've been able to push that a lot more and tell a visual story like with somebody going through their day or whatever, and you're telling a story with that. And that's something that I've seen that I've been able to do a lot more of, is kind of a visual storytelling without words. I did some short films for Our Daily Bread Ministries. It was through a different client, so I filmed it, I DP'd them, but it was really interesting because they wanted these stories told in like 3 minutes, like under 3 minutes, 2 minutes or something like that with no dialogue. And it was always these like little mini vignettes with these, you know, scenarios. And yeah, I guess, so that was a way that like narrative trickled into kind of, I guess, more of a corporate space, is like doing little vignette type things. Or I find like B-roll a lot of the times is turning into a lot of kind of day in the life stuff that can be very narrative driven. I've seen a lot of it without actual dialogue in the corporate world.
Sure. Yeah, so that's, I was thinking that's good. There's also another approach, I guess, to say of how does narrative work fit into your career? And so some of them here I know are doing feature films. And there's, like Adam said, some are looking to find ways to fit narrative into the other work that they're doing. So however you want to take that question, I guess you could take it from several different angles. But anybody else have thoughts on narrative work and how that fits for you?
The way that it's fit for me personally is I've had to take a recognition that whenever you're moving into a specific space, whether you're moving into the promotional space or moving into the narrative space, you have to recognize that initially it is not going to be something that is going to be financially viable. And especially if you're looking at short films, they really do not make money, really, to be honest. So taking on a job in one of those films, what I've found is looking at them as opportunities to learn and grow. You don't have, the client work is fantastic because you've got some distinct boundaries to work within, and that stretches you one way creatively. But once you move into a narrative space, that stretches you a different direction, making sure that you're better rounded. So that, and then just developing relationships with other filmmakers. There's not really a better way. I mean, actually, just tomorrow, going to be working on a 24-hour short film project. And there's no expectation of financial reimbursement. There's no expectation of it advancing the career in that way. But I do know I'm going to know these people far better than I ever would have otherwise. I'm going to learn a lot about myself, about everybody else that's on this project in that extremely condensed time frame. So looking at every narrative project from that perspective is a good thing, especially if you're starting out. And then the math mentally kind of starts to change as it becomes an actual part of your income, as opposed to the promotional becomes the income. So there's a shift that has to take place someplace in there. And that's going to be really dependent on the person and the opportunities that they have.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think network is the biggest thing that I've observed is, I was just reading about, I think it was John Kennedy who developed this framework for prioritizing decisions. But if you think of 4 quadrants and the top 2 squares are urgent, and the leftmost squares are important. So in your top left, we have urgent and important. And then we have urgent but not important. And then we have not important but urgent. And we have not urgent and not important. Okay, so it's kind of hard to verbally picture that. But the premise is that we generally focus on the tasks that are important and urgent, like phone calls or emails or deadlines. But we rarely focus on the things that are important but not urgent. That's usually relationships, career trajectory, networking, those kind of things, because there's no unread badge on our iPhone that says you haven't networked with anyone today, but there is for our inbox. And so as much as possible, having the self-awareness to pull back and actually work on your business and not in your business. So say, how can I develop a broader network? Maybe I'm going to choose 3 conferences that I'm going to go to this year, or I'm going to intentionally reach out to someone I haven't talked to in a while that I admire. Every week I'm going to shoot an email, or I'm going to try and grab dinner with some people. But finding chances to network with people is something I'm learning and trying to improve on myself. But I have found for my work in the feature film, like narrative space, is that like 90% of my work has come because I worked on another project and I knew the producer or the AD or someone of importance that brought me onto another project. So I can't overstate the importance of developing relationships. And ultimately, you do have to, like Jonathan said, when you start off in any career, any field, you're going to start off at the bottom just kind of by nature. And so be prepared for that and be prepared to work on a couple projects for, in a low position or for not a lot of pay in order to develop those relationships. And if you can do that while you're young, you'll be the better for it, because when you're 27, it's a lot harder to go around and work for free on feature films for a year than when you're 19. And certainly that season has to have an end too. So I'm not advocating working around for free forever, but all I can say is the first feature film I worked on was Beyond the Mask. That wasn't my own project. It was Beyond the Mask, and I worked on that for free, essentially. And that has literally directly connected to every single feature film project that I've worked on since, including War Room. And it was because I volunteered basically 2 months of my life to be brutally overworked and underfed. Well, not underfed. They actually fed us really well. But and I wouldn't trade that for the world because of where it's led and the experience I had there. So start small, take baby steps, but network along the way.
Good. Thanks. Other thoughts on how narrative fits into your career, whether you're doing narrative commercials or you're making money doing narrative features? Brett, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I know you're one of the more active feature film directors here on the panel today. What's your thoughts on narrative work and how that fits in a career?
I think it's mainly a matter of how badly do you want to do narrative, because I like what Luke said. We have a responsibility as creatives to open up people's minds to the possibilities of what narrative could do for their project. One of the most treasured things that the Lord has given us is the ability to connect with story. Obviously Jesus taught in parables, but he didn't just teach parables for the sake of teaching parables. It was because the people who were not exposed to the kingdom of God, he taught them in parables so that they could connect to some kind of a tangible physical idea. And so when you're talking about, if you're looking at feature films and short films, obviously you want to be able to do narrative storytelling well. And I actually think the best form of developing a feature film is to do a bunch of short films. I think that another way to really stretch yourself in narrative storytelling is finding something that categorically is not narrative and then inserting the narrative into it. For example, last year, my brother and I were hired to go to Pennsylvania to shoot a promotional campaign, a series of videos, very explainer, instructional type mindset for a food company. They distribute food. So we went to a warehouse and we shot a bunch of B-roll. But the biggest thing that we were doing beforehand is my brother and I sat down and the client had hired a branding company and they wrote a script, which is just a narration voiceover. And my brother and I went in and storyboarded the whole narration of shots that we wanted to get that were staged, but then also just a mindset of what B-roll we wanted to capture that was going to be more narrative driven than just covering the warehouse with different creative angles. And so what we delivered to the client was an emotional, compelling story of what is the DNA of their company and why does it matter. And then recently, I was fortunate to work on another music video for a hip hop artist, and he was very strong that I want to do a performance video. I love performance music videos. They're great. They're fun to watch. But I asked him, I said, well, can we take it a little step further? I didn't get to go as far as I wanted to go with the narrative with that music video, but I asked him simply, why is the song called Turbulence? And he told me the story of how that came to be, and he actually wrote it while he was on a plane, experiencing some turbulence. But we settled in on the mindset, and I told him, look, turbulence is unrelatable when you're on a plane and when you're on the ground. There's no correlation there. But there is turbulence of life. And so we explored this whole concept of defining turbulence aside from planes. And that was the motivation we went through for the music video. And that was still very much a performance-driven music video. But I got to try some things that helped me when I'm looking at a feature film or a short film or whatever the case would be. And so right now I'm in development on a bunch of different scripts right now that are in development stage for features. And I'm incorporating some of these ideas that I've been kind of kicking around on client corporate projects that have been kind of seeping into my mindset as I'm writing or consulting.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. We're like right at 1 o'clock, so I want to do one flash round as we close out and say, what's a resource you would recommend for personal or business growth? Books, podcasts, courses, training, conferences, it could be anything. Keep it real short and simple. What's something you recommend for people to continue growing personally in their career? Serena.
Ocean University.
Okay. Good. Adam, what's something you recommend? Oh, go ahead and unmute there. Yep. What do you recommend? Yep.
Am I unmuted now? I'd say Shane's Inner Circle, if you're into lighting and camera stuff, is unbeatable for the price.
Cool. Good. Great. Luke.
A leadership podcast called the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. I realize that it's kind of a wordful. It's 20 minutes once a month, but the content that he fits into that 20 minutes is revolutionary. So anyone who's leading any kind of business or organization, listen to that.
Perfect. Great. Jonathan.
Personal development, I'd say the book Bonhoeffer. Went through that just recently, and it's really significantly challenged me in life in general. And so how do what we think up here and have head knowledge, how does that actually live itself out as we're trying to be Christians in the marketplace, in the world? Really impactful book.
Nice, great. And Brett, what's a resource you recommend?
Motion University, Christian Worldview Film Festival, and Midwest Christian Filmmakers Academy. Tomorrow's Filmmakers are also really great resources and platforms. I think that something that we didn't really touch on today, that and this is not to to change the discussion, but the more in love we fall with the Lord. In fact, I read a book recently called The Gospel Primer, and it's a look at the gospel in a completely different way. It re-energized my faith, my passion for the Lord. And that, honestly, I believe will impact everything that what we do, regardless of what it is, whether it's writing, shooting, editing, lighting, doing makeup, whatever the case is. The gospel impacts us to love people and to do what we do well.
Great. That's that's called the Gospel Primer.
The Gospel Primer.
Nice. Very good. Great resources. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we will look forward to doing more of these in the future. Everybody watching, feel free to send us questions you'd like to hear topics in the future. If you have any other panelists you'd like to hear, we're going to shake it up, change it up, and just keep getting to know the community and helping each other grow. So thank you all, and see you next time.
All right. See you guys.
Awesome. Take care.
All right.